All right. Welcome to the CTE's AI Studio Reflection podcast. In this series, we showcase how faculty are experimenting with artificial intelligence in their teaching and research at SMU. Each episode features a professor sharing their innovation, experience, and takeaways from their projects with the goal to spark ideas, share resources, and encourage experimentation in teaching and research at SMU. So let's get into it. Please introduce yourself, your department, and the course, if applicable, where you used an AI tool to accomplish your research goals.
All right, so I'm Kristina Nielsen. I'm in the musicology department, and I have been experimenting with using Claude in particular for thinking about my research and the workflow in particular.
That's awesome. And what prompted you to use AI? Like, what were your goals? Something that wasn't working that then AI helped you get better at?
Yeah, so what really made me decide to try to experiment with what I'm going to be showing you here today is because I've been trying to do more reading on my iPad because I get tired of sitting in front of the computer. But the problem was trying to get the notes that I take there into my bibliography software. There was a workflow issue. And so I became curious about using AI to think about how to make it so that notes and highlighted marks could better translate into my bibliography software, which I was excited to be able to do in a way that I felt was actually quite successful.
That's cool. And which you mentioned Claude, but did you use any other tools? And how did you decide to use the tools you used?
Yeah, so I've been using Claude and Beaver, which I can also show you in Zotero. And we got, along with the SMU library grant that they had, I worked with a group where there was a grant for experimenting with some tools. And so I went with Claude, which, quite similar to like ChatGPT. I've just found it to work very well for me. Um, and so I'll admit I haven't played as much with the other ones. But that's kind of how I landed on using those ones for this project.
Okay. Will you show us what you have?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. All right. So what I developed here is in for Zotero. I'm gonna back up for a minute. There's something called plugins, which is basically like a program that you can create within a program that helps you do something. So if we go to Zotero here and go to Tools, let's see, Plugins. This is basically a place where you can go and you can download different plugins. But the thing I realized to solve my problem about my workflow was that I wanted to try to create my own plugin because I knew what I wanted to be extracted from PDFs that I was making notes in. So what I did in Claude was I effectively gave Claude some examples. This is my second take. The first one did not succeed. And this is somewhere where you learn very quickly that it does take a little bit of problem solving to come up with a prompt and being specific about what you wanted. But after some back and forths, I successfully got what I called it the outline extractor. But the point being that I could highlight, I'm going down to the bottom, you can see it's showing kind of a breakdown of what it's doing. So basically when I highlight, I can color code things and it will actually kind of mark that for me when I extract the notes from a PDF, so from the PDF reader in Zotero, it can extract that for me in a way that's really quite readable, and that kind of helps me organize my notes and my workflow for the project I'm currently working on. So basically, when you download here, if you hit download and open, it'll bring this to your desktop. And then if you go here, let's see, I guess actually right now it doesn't look like it has it enabled. So if I go install plugin from file, and it should have, if I go outline extractor, open, and then you'll see it shows up here, right? So this is the plugin that I created here. All right, so then what it can do for me, so if we go into the PDF viewer. So this is an example um, of an article that I annotated. So yellow is things I'm highlighting that are texts that I think are particularly important. There are also places where I've put a few notes in on the side. And then you'll notice that headings are highlighted in green. Now, the reason for this is that those colors have a different significance. So if I go to copy annotation, outline to clipboard, if I then go to, let's see, I had a blank Word document here to help make this easier. Okay, if I paste, you can see that what it gives me is basically the outline that I have there. Now, the green things are showing up bolded here, so it kind of helps me kind of outline the article, and then all the quotes that I highlighted, it has the orange line next to it, whereas the notes that I've taken, because I'm trying to keep it separate, it shows up in blue here below. So it's kind of my own way of keeping my own notes and summary kind of separate, but having it all kind of show up in one place. And so once again, this is a plugin that I was able to build just using some of those other plugins that were available online as models and then telling it what I wanted it to do. I've also set it up so it always puts my own summary at the top so it can pull that from Zotero as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
so let me review. So you've created a plugin for Zotero because you needed to read lots of documents for your research, and you needed
Hmm.
a way to quickly and easily export all of your highlights that you do manually, right? So you highlight the headings, you also highlight the parts that interest you that you may want as quotes for your articles, and then the plugin that you created using Claude allows you to quickly export all those highlights into one new document where you can then prioritize and add your own research to use these kinds of citations. Is that
Yeah,
accurate?
and I use Scrivener for my own writing, and so putting it all into Scrivener where I can then more quickly search to find the quotes that I want and know exactly where they are, and also have my own notes. So Zotero can actually extract things you highlight automatically. The thing that I wanted also was to be able to have the headings to kind of have the outline for being able to look through quickly and then have a clear distinction with my own notes and just having them all show up in one place, along with the summary at the top that I write.
Okay, so are you a coder?
I am not a coder. This is where like I played with it and it took a little bit extra back and forth with Claude and problem solving. And there were some things at first with like what it didn't want to extract and not recognizing the different colors. But being able to work with it back and forth, I was still able to get this coded.
That's awesome. So a non-coder builds a Zotero plugin. I think that's pretty amazing personally, because if you did not have access to these AI tools, would this even have been possible?
Um, no, because I would have to like either find someone to do it for me and so this is where like I think thinking about like the workflow issues with AI rather than like it's not going to write my article for me, obviously.
Yeah.
But it can definitely help kind of streamline the process for how I do that and thinking about where those hiccups are, and it can kind of help think about bridging some of those spots.
Okay, so let's think about kind of the process a bit more. And I want to
Hmm.
know so once you have an idea of what you want to do, how did you get Claude to build this for you? Can you give us a few more steps if
Hmm.
somebody would want to do something similar when they have their own research
Hmm.
aims or ideas and they want to build some sort of tool similar to this? How did you go about the process of building your own extension?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, that there's a lot of different plugins that you can download for Zotero. So the place to start with whatever it is you're wanting to do is to find the best examples that you can find, because the better examples you give it, and then the clear parameters of what you want, the less back and forth. Like if you just ask it to build a plugin and you don't give it an example, it won't have much of an idea. Like it'll say yes and it'll give you something, um, but uh, it won't work in many cases because it'll be missing some fundamental frameworks. So the more examples that you can give it of in this case, I believe it's an XPI file for the plugins and going and downloading them. Even like just two examples, I believe is what I gave it, and then told it what I was looking for. It was able to do it quite successfully after some back and forth. And you find things like that. In this case, like copying to Word. There was some like formatting issues with Claude exporting things as tables and Word, then adding a background color to it. So, the thing is, I don't know coding, but I've actually learned quite a bit too from doing it. Not in the sense that I would at all pretend I could code something, but in the sense that I kind of understand a little bit better, like how Claude's thinking about it and then how that's going into Word or not going into Word, and kind of some of those questions that emerge that have to be resolved with Claude about thinking about what it's actually exporting.
And how many back and forths do you remember doing? Like, was this something that took you 10 hours to build this? You would think that, I mean, it probably took days because of all the, changes that you learn
I
and
say
yeah.
it took about a day. It took
Okay.
about a day, and now I could do it a lot faster because it's also me learning how to ask and what it needs. Because like I kind of mentioned the first time I did it, I didn't really think to give it examples. I was just like, "Oh, is this something you could do?" And it said yes, and I was like, "Well, then let's do it." And then it didn't work, right? So now it's like, "Oh, okay, I understand that it can do this, but in order to do it successfully, it needs these examples, and I need to know what I want, because that's the other thing is when you're first doing it, if you just say, okay, let's build this, but if I haven't specified, how I want the different colors to be, what features am I looking for, what will make my process easier, that you actually have to really sit down and think about that in a little bit more detail. And some of it is trial and error. Like you try it and you figure out something that doesn't work, or oh, it would be really nice if, it could do this too. But a lot of it is also just kind of having a formulated idea to work from. But I do think, especially, as a non-coder going into it just to see what could happen and then just being kind of fascinated by it and continuing down that road, it was a day to kind of get what I wanted. But also, you kind of would reach the cap and then kind of come back and try again. So it wasn't like continuous, but I'd say it was probably like 6 or 7 hours that to like get it where I wanted it.
That's pretty cool. Is there anything that surprised you in working with AI to create this plugin?
Uh, I I mean, I think that it kind of really changed my understanding of, because so much has been focused on AI and um generating content to that could replace the human work.
Mhm.
And I think it kind of flips that and kind of got me to think about some of it differently in terms of like what it can actually do well, and what it can't do well. And it's been interesting because I've kind of been I haven't, like, Claude has not been writing the article I'm working on right now, but I've been discussing the article with it because I think it's kind of interesting to see how it approaches certain things or what it would do, which I often kind of disagree with because it often is missing some context or information. Um, but it is really interesting, and I actually had asked it about it generating text, or if it thought it could have written this article now. And it was very clear, like, no, it didn't think it could have done it. Right. So I think it's one of those things where you kind of start to see what it can do successfully and where it contributes to our goals. And then also there are just these very real limits still, because it doesn't have the context, and it can't really, especially in a qualitative field, have access to all the data that comes from human relationships.
Hmm. How did this collaboration with AI then influence your own research? right? You're having these conversations. Do you feel that it's making your research more inclusive, more able, better grounded, or how do you feel about these collaborations?
I think um I think in some ways it's helped me think about things a little bit more efficiently because you kind of see how it's thinking about like research as like or like writing as like a okay, you've spoken to A and B, but here's the link that's missing, right? And so whereas for me, I would come to what that link was eventually having read it a lot more times, but like, it would have taken a lot more cups of coffee and kind of pulling my hair out to like try to figure out like, okay, I know something's off, but where is it? And so the fact that it can kind of look at a paragraph and say like, oh, well, you've not connected these two ideas, right? Like that's been really helpful. So it's like a good peer reviewer in that way, for just saying like what where the reasoning is falling short. But then if you ask it to make a suggestion, sometimes it has some good ones, and sometimes because it's missing something vital, it doesn't quite understand like a natural part of the progression. And because it can't bring new data in, that's also where you get kind of that vapid language, right? So that's why, like, I still am very wary of what it actually like generates in terms of writing. But its ability to like point out where ideas are not linking or where something has been missed in an argument, I think is really useful. For kind of a good peer reviewer approach. And so it's a good co-writer in that way.
Here's a difficult question, but where's your red line when it comes to AI usage in research, of where AI is doing too much and
Hmm.
that no longer becomes your article? Like
Yeah.
how do you see yourself in this debate that's happening right now in the media and in reality, of we all collaborate or we have this extra editor or peer reviewer that can be super
Hmm.
helpful, but
Yeah.
where do you think that line crosses into plagiarism or academic dishonesty or something like that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's definitely a real question that we all have to consider. I mean, I'm definitely very hesitant about the copy pasting, claiming it as my own, right? Like I don't think that that's ethical. I also don't. And once again, like the other thing is like if it can generate it, though, like in this case for my own research, like what it could generate would be so banal if it were just drawing on its own stuff or it has when I like play with it, that I don't know how useful it would be to any reader, either. But I do think that that question of um, where it lands, um, for like generating text is something that's fuzzy. And I mean, best practices is transparency. If one is drawing and copy pasting things, or if it has created something and maybe one feels that it is useful, in which case, like, I mean, I think that if there is a problem of saying and having it as a co-writer, then there's probably a bigger problem
Mhm.
regardless. And co-writers and like it actually like formulating the text and not, just having a conversation about what is being written, or looking at, asking it for feedback on something to get a sense of like where the shortcomings are or what it would change, um, or where commas go. I guess for me, like that stuff, we have Grammarly and we have Word that have been nudging us with suggestions for a long time, with those kinds of things, and so in that way, that isn't particularly or remarkably different. But I do think that question of it generating like whole paragraphs and then just putting them in, um, really raises a whole other issue.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so going back to the tool that you've
Hmm.
created, if one of your colleagues would come to you and ask you, how do I do something similar? I have my research goal. Where would you point them so they would have a good start and maybe not have the same difficulties that you may have had?
Yeah. Um, so I would say that going and finding the samples is a big one, and I can share my plugin too, and you can use that as an example as well if you want to do something similar with some small tweaks for your own workflow. Um, and then I think really thinking about prompting and laying out what exactly you want is a big one. And I know I don't have any off the top of my mind, but there are definitely some good resources online about, how to prompt effectively. I admittedly tend to, with these kinds of things, just like jump in feet first and then figure it out afterwards because I'm curious, and kind of make my way backwards to the best way of doing it. But I'm sure there are more efficient ways of doing it if you don't have a day to play around with it to get to the results that you want.
Yeah, I've heard of a really good tip, is that when you prompt something, don't simply ask it, but also ask the AI to ask you what you're missing. So like you would
Hmm.
ask it, hey, I'm trying to build a plugin for Zotero that does this and this. What else am I missing? How would you go about it? Stop and
Yeah.
prompt me if you need more information. Like when I've added those kinds of tact suggestions to my prompting, they usually result in better things because I usually don't know what I'm asking initially. Like I know
Yeah.
what I wanted and it's in my head, but to get it out of my head and into the AI tool to then build something for me, it usually needs a lot more information that we usually don't give it. So it's good
Hmm.
to ask the AI to ask you what else is needed. How else
Yeah.
would you change this? What else would you add? And then more stuff like that happens.
Yeah,
Very
I would
cool.
also say giving it examples of what comes out. So if you don't like
Mhm.
the document that it produces, and I just have it copied to the clipboard and then can paste it in. Uh, and so I'll upload the document and say, here's what it looks like. Is this what you envisioned? Here's what I'm seeing. And that's where it can often create a lot of progress because it can better identify what's actually happening between the plugin that it created and how it's actually exporting. And I've had that too with a different project, but where it was exporting PDFs and kind of seeing where it wasn't actually producing what Claude had thought it would. Um, but when you give it the example, it can very quickly identify where something went off the rails.
Christina, what's next for you? Are you working on any new projects using AI tools, or what's down the line for you?
I mean, right now, this is the first uh real article project I've worked on while AI exists. And so it's been interesting to kind of figure out, and like you were asking about those ethical questions, and for myself, kind of figuring out what workflow looks like and what that where where that conversation happens, and kind of really thinking about these big picture questions, and actually sometimes having kind of deep conversations with the AI along the way of like I was asking it about the jailbreak today was where I'm like, so what do you think about this in terms of, because I just can't help but be curious, and and it was thinking about like being the outcome driven version
Mm,
that then led to subverting ethics.
mm.
And it is interesting, like where, and I still, in some ways understand the the predictiveness of the text, and still like the interesting um kind of odd relationship that we have with this thing that's emerging, that I mean just yeah, it's just really really fascinating to me.
Yeah, it's like you're
um
talking to the smartest person ever, but also the dumbest person ever.
Yeah, and just how it yeah, and I think also, I know we're talking about research right now, but it is like I think that using it right now for thinking about my own workflow has been important for thinking about how I'm going to be teaching it this fall, and kind of thinking about like where these lines are. And I think that that question of us not knowing the ethical answer for some of this stuff, that we also just have to be really upfront about that, and that it's kind of a collective project right now of figuring out what what is or is not ethical and making sure that we're being transparent about that across the board. And that's definitely something that I'm going to be bringing into the classroom too. Yeah, we'll see what. I'm curious to hear what students will think this
Yeah.
fall.
One last question. Would you be worried about disclosing in a peer-reviewed journal that you used AI as a thought partner or something of the sort? Would that worry you that you would not be accepted because of it?
I wouldn't be worried about that. Um, I think. I mean, I think it's something that I feel like is probably becoming kind of standard in some way of, how much people are engaging with it. Um, I think, I mean, and then there was the whole controversy about the watermark thing that just happened using Claude 2, which I went and read more about it. And part of what it is the predictive text, basically using words that would fall outside its normal predictions that would effectively and make it possible for it to see that it was the one who had generated
Hmm.
it. Which is interesting because also even like thinking about the things that it has suggested when I ask it, like, hey, do you have a suggestion for linking this idea and this idea? Um, like I don't care for the wordings, even if the idea, like the concept of like what needs to be there to link the ideas may be good. Um, and so I will be curious to see too, like how that plays out, um, of like, because I do think that there has to be some transparency and there has to be some way to know.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that it's all necessarily bad, right? If the point is the data and the AI is summarizing data that was collected by humans for their research, and that's a effective way of presenting it, I'm not convinced that the fact that AI summarized it effectively and created something that would read and present that data is necessarily a bad thing. Um, but at the same time, like it is that ethical issue that is interlaced with a lot of broader social issues in the moment too, right? So it's and I'm curious to see if that is maybe more where journals ultimately respond, or some of these things that wind up becoming a little bit of litmus tests, as opposed
Yeah.
to perhaps, and that's something that I think would be unfortunate if it's not part of a broader conversation about how things are actually being used. Um, you know, unless there is like some real context that warrants it. But I don't know what the answer is. So I'm as confused as everyone else. I'm just trying to do my best to learn and understand what it can and cannot do and where it is and is not helpful at the
That's
moment.
awesome. Well, Christina, thank you so much for sharing your project with the CTE's AI Studio for Teaching and Learning. If you'd like to explore more faculty projects and practical examples of AI uses at SMU in terms of teaching and research, visit our online repository at ai-studio.smu.edu. And that is a wrap. Thank you, Christina.
Thanks, Constantine.